is this really what I want? And I'm a fan of the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah, I love
the
that.
intersection of your greatest competency and your greatest passion. And to me, that is your life's purpose. A lot of people just do what they happen to might be good at or passionate about. But when you reach that intersection, you realize that, oh, wait, it's not about being better than my peers or being the smartest person in the room or having the most titles or having the most degrees or having the most achievements. It's what is uniquely successful to me.
Welcome to the Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. This is Phil Michaels, Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur and performance coach. Every year, Forbes names the top 30 entrepreneurs, leaders, and stars in the world. And each week, I bring you one of them to help you level up in your life and business. From celebrities like LeBron James to Kylie Jenner and Cardi B, to entrepreneurs with companies like DoorDash, Instagram, and YouTube, you're sure to learn from the list. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now it's time to level up. Level up.
Welcome to Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. Today we have a very special guest. He is an executive and team coach, venture capital advisor, and a musician based in Berlin, Germany. As a partner at Volate coaching company, he works with European founders on tackling personal, organizational, and business growth topics. He serves as a VC expert advisor to the European Commission on its Horizon 2020 program. You can also find him playing the guitar on Berlin stages and recording studios. Please welcome my very special guest, Julius.
Thank you very much.
Very excited to have you here. It's my absolute pleasure. And I finally get to talk with another coach.
Yeah, it's rare, right? How these coach to coach conversations happen outside of like the industry bodies, and otherwise we spend most of our time with founders or investors for that matter. Yeah, it's great to be here. Excited.
Me as well. And I'm so excited to share with the audience how important coaching is and to hear it from a coach's perspective. So everybody needs a coach. I just shared this and I tell my clients this is every athlete doesn't have a coach, but every Olympian does. So if you want to take your performance to the next level, invest in a coach.
Very true. Yeah.
We'll dive into that deeper in just a moment, but you made the Forbes list and I'm curious to hear where you were when you made the Forbes list.
Good question. So I remember this comes out in January, right? At least for the European section of it, and I remember Forbes basically has this short list format where they send a message to I don't know how many. Asking like, hey, you're on the short list to making the Forbes list. Do you want to come to London? So you find out right away when it gets announced. And I was like, I'm never going to make it on that list. I'm not going to go to London. I'll just sit it out, and then at some point, oh yeah, now I remember. I'm sitting in my office. Back then I was working for a venture capital fund in Berlin. And I open my emails in the morning and I get these hot flashes. And because apparently I had already grasped what was in my inbox, but I didn't actually read it. Like my eyes went over it and I felt myself tense up. I'm going, what is this? Oh, there's an email and it says you made it on the Forbes list. And I kind of flew through that day.
Who was the first person you shared it with? I mean, it's such a proud moment. The first thing you like to do is usually share it with a loved one.
Right. Well, about 3.5 minutes later, my colleague came in, who I spent lots of time with at the time. And I mean, that was the first person I was like, this just happened, because I hadn't told anyone about the process before. I didn't know what it meant to be nominated and what the chances were. And so I thought, keep it, play it safe, don't blow it up.
And you were working at venture capital at the time, so you were in finance 2017.
That's right. Yeah. So my career began in finance, and I think even as a coach today, that's the perspective that I'm taking. Is um, I have I've worked in venture. I've invested in a lot of companies. I saw a lot of entrepreneurs pitch and then and kind of see how they perform afterwards. I've also seen the operational side of finance because I built finance departments multiple times in companies. And nowadays, kind of that general scope is also where I train executives around the questions of like planning, forecasting, and how they can make that work for them strategically.
Yeah, your experience previously adds to the value you provide as a coach. I used to be under this impression like, man, I wish I would have started coaching earlier.
Yeah, right.
Because I was pre-med in my undergrad, and then I went on to MBA school and got a master's of science and marketing. And I'm like, wait a second, all those experiences are what make me a more valuable, better coach.
Exactly. I was just having this discussion with another coach today. Actually, well, so you're my second coach that I'm talking to today, and we were just having this discussion about coaching courses, and there's lots of coaching courses out there that you can take right now, and the uniqueness of a coach is really how she or he integrates all of the things that have happened up until now into the work that has impact on clients in the future.
That's a great point. And tell us how you got to that point. I mean, how did you even get to finance? Take us back to the very beginning, where you're from, where you grew up, and ultimately the path that led you to where you're at now and making the Forbes list and then in coaching.
Right. So I grew up outside of Munich, Germany. Spent my childhood basically playing guitar and computer games. And the early days, I was active in a lot of communities at school, also in my kind of computer gaming world. I played in bands, and I think a lot of that kind of activity and engagement paid off later because it produced a lot of opportunity for me that I never knew, was in the cards. My early days were kind of mostly thinking, work hard in school, get a job, and in school you don't think about beyond the point of like graduation and getting a job. And so I had a very kind of linear perspective on how this would work. I started getting a little bit more international exposure. I moved to the US for a year. Then I came back to Germany, moved to Switzerland, moved to Singapore as part of my university degree. I trained in economics, which to me was the more kind of I loved economics because of the systems thinking aspect, because I always had the feeling that everything is connected, and that really kind of played to that strength. Had a quick encounter with consulting in Switzerland, but very quickly realized that like the big consulting world wasn't really for me. And then moved to London to get a graduate degree. And during that time, I had already started building this kind of hackathon community during college times. So I was aware of the startup scene and that things were a little bit more relaxed, but still they produced lots of outcome and interesting kind of stories as far as I could tell as a recent graduate. And so I read this interview with an angel investor who was putting up syndicates in the US. And so at that time, I was a German based in London in school, and I basically said, hey, I previously worked with startups in this hackathon community. I also did some financial consulting, so I can read it. I can basically read a P&L, and I'd love to volunteer for you. And I thought, it can't hurt. Even if he said no, I can't forget that. And if he doesn't say anything, nothing changes in my life, and my life's pretty good right now. But what happened then, I actually looked at this message 3-4 days ago. A few days later, I received a message saying, great to have you. My colleague will put you on the mailing list. And that was the time, that was the moment when my inbox blew up. And what I guess angel investors spend years to build deal flow was right then, every day. I didn't earn any money. I worked at night with the West Coast based investors, and during the day I would go to school. So it's not a very sustainable strategy. Talk about, sleep as the bedrock of your performance. But that ended up giving me the connections, the insight, the first kind of inklings of experience of venture. And I then moved out to Berlin, and without knowing it, there were a couple of entrepreneurs in London at the time that I just had, basically helped out. I wouldn't call myself an advisor. I mean, I barely had 5 months in venture. But I gave them some pointers, whatever I knew I passed on. And one of these had made the previous year's list and had nominated me. And so one day I received an email saying, hey, do you want to tell us more about yourself? You were nominated for the Forbes list. And this was, 2 or 3 years into my venture career for real in Berlin. I was managing a 20 million fund for a corporate bank in Berlin, and I was like, wait, how did this come together? And then you don't really have any insight into the process, so you at some point just learn that you've been selected, and that was a great experience. I mean, primarily meeting all of the other kind of members of that community in Tel Aviv, in Boston, Berlin, lots of interesting events and lots of inspiring personalities.
That's amazing. And it sounds like a similar story to what we had. I still to this day don't know who nominated us, actually. We think it's someone from the Clinton Global Initiative because we were on stage at the Holt Prize there. So that was, it's still to this day, we're just very grateful for it, but we don't know. It came as such a surprise. So it makes it even that much more exciting because you're not expecting it. And then it comes,
exactly.
Wow, it's a game changer. You're like, I made it.
Yeah.
And so how would you define your maybe most important personal attribute that got you to where you are today, reaching this success?
That's a very good question. I would think, I think it's relatability. Maybe that paired with clarity. I take time and try to understand people without any preconceived notion of like, you are just this, or you're just that, you're the CEO, so therefore I have the following expectations to you. And then at the same time, maybe it's because I'm very simple, like in my foundations, but like when I restate things, I try to put them as clearly as possible, foolproof, and that had seemed to help a lot of people that I that I talked to in the past. And that was one of the reasons why I got into coaching, because more and more people came to me and asked me for advice. And very early I said, look, I mean, I don't know anything. I'm barely 30 years old. How can I tell you about your career, or like how you're supposed to finance your company? And if there was a method to, leverage your own strength and your own kind of resources to reach your goal without me being, telling you what to do, that would be great. And then, it took 5 years, and then I kind of slowly stumbled up on coaching as a profession.
That's amazing. And so relatability is so important. You have to build that rapport first, make sure you have some chemistry, because people don't really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them as a person.
That's right. That's great. I'm gonna write that down. Thank you. my
Coaches,
next quote.
Coaches helping coaches. There we go.
Yeah.
So, coaching, I think of you in Germany. I mean, you're an outlier, because in Germany, especially with the Stoic philosophy and the culture, the stereotypical German, blank stare, for example, not very animated, not very emotional. What do you do in a situation where you're a coach in an environment that's not known for having coaches in the mainstream world?
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Well, I think you're hitting on a very real challenge. This market doesn't have a lot of coaches, specifically not kind of geared at founders in venture. And I think part of that is just timing, and part of it is, as you said, culture, right? The timing part is when we look at, the US or London, respectively, they're 40 years ahead of us, they're 15 years ahead of us, and we kind of see a full-blown coaching ecosystem in the US. We see, certainly executive coaching being very firmly established in London. And in Germany, or in the German-speaking countries, there's maybe, 5 or 10 coaches, and we all know each other, that work in this field. And I think German people are not unemotional in that sense. There's just another kind of layer of how we think we should handle ourselves with other people, and I think kind of peeling off that layer and saying, I appreciate the way you are, and I totally see you, because I come from that same background, on many different levels from that same background. But we're trying to work on all the things that drive you to the success, but potentially also the challenges and the pain that you're experiencing right now. So we want to go to where that fire burns, right? And as any human, that source is burning. It's a very big fire for everyone, and it's just that I guess in Germany we're not showing it as much, but it's there.
It's still there, but maybe we're suppressing it because of the cultural norms or narratives that, like you said, there's these labels that we put on ourselves, like I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. In reality, as Malcolm Gladwell more eloquently describes in his book, Tipping Point, it's like labels are just situational. In some situations, you might be more introverted. In other situations, you might be more extroverted. In some situations, you might think more democratically or liberal. In other situations, you might think more conservatively or Republican. So it's like you're making sure that we're not boxing ourselves in and defining ourselves by those labels, but also we need to first get it out of you in the first place to see where you're at and where you want to be. And sometimes it sounds like what I'm hearing in the culture is that we're not always good in the German culture of sharing that information openly?
Yes, that is true. And at the same time, when you look at the clientele or like the audience that I work with, and I would expect you work with, leaders in their fields, then you realize that those people are very often outliers in a certain range of what they do, and that means they're often very different from like whatever you assume to be the standard of that population, right?
So how do you manage that? I mean, that's got to be difficult. Let's say someone comes in and they're like, oh, I don't need a coach. I mean, you and I were just talking about this before we started the interview. The biggest objection I see many high achievers, many successful entrepreneurs, and even academics and researchers, they feel, I don't need a coach. And a lot of times I find it's the ego is preventing them from realizing that it's okay. And a lot of successful people do. I mean, the CEO of Google has a coach. Steve Jobs had a coach. COO of Facebook has a coach. Some of the most successful people on earth invest in coaches because they want to invest in themselves.
Right. I think that's, I mean, what you're just mentioning is one of the first things I would say. Like how do you think really successful people get to where they're at? It's not a one-person show. It is never a one-person show. Every kind of, I think there's this theory about like every generator has their integrator or something like that in a book called Rocket Fuel, which I quite like. There is a team to every success, and there's a huge backstory to every one-hit wonder. And coaches are involved. If they're calling themselves coaches or not, that's a different set of questions. So that's one. Two, I just asked them, well, so what's your goal? Like, where do you want to go? I recognize you're very successful now, but where do you want to go? And do you know how to get there? And if you have goals and you exactly know how to get there, are those ambitious goals, right? And then thirdly, we have a lot of very well educated clients, and they know a lot of stuff, and they have. I was listening to one of your episodes, right? So they would listen to audiobooks on like 3x speed and tell I know of all the theories, and then you ask, well, so what? What do you make of it? And like all the knowledge is not worth a thing if you don't have a way to put it to work. And the problem is we have so much opportunity. We could, spend our entire life consuming information and knowing it all, but without a framework and kind of a partnership to put that to either paper or, bring it into a company and bring it to life. It doesn't create any impact.
Doesn't matter how many books you read. If you're not taking what you learned and applying it to your everyday life and utilizing it to your advantage, it means little to nothing. And
exactly.
I mean, I love what you said there. It's just that you need to see how you can bounce ideas off of other people. And maybe that gives you clarity on where you need to go. Maybe you don't know where you're going right now, and maybe you have ambitious goals, but just chatting with someone can help you get there faster and accelerate the speed at which you're going about your path.
Right.
And just because you have a degree, you have all these credentials, I've noticed it becomes your identity. And so as soon as you level up and you get that next achievement, you're like, okay, I'm now on the Forbes list. This is my new identity. Okay, I've got my PhD. This is my new identity. And we start to reside on these identities. And at the end of the day, like you said, okay, then what? So what? What does it mean? Just because you have them, what do you actually do with it? Some of
And
the smartest
it's a little
people
bit like an armor,
yeah, go
right?
ahead.
It's like, now I have my PhD, or I don't have a PhD, but like, I have this degree from London Business School. It doesn't do much yet, but I can put it on my LinkedIn profile, and then I can be in the London Business School alumni group. And there's a lot of extremely smart and driven and successful people in there. And I mean, it's a very good school. But hiding behind that label doesn't show you anything about who I really am. And I would put the hypothesis out that a lot of these very successful people have a huge imposter syndrome, because it's much easier achieving title after title after title after title, as they think, than having real success. And then you ask themselves, so what is real success? And they wouldn't really know. They would say either like, well, I want to be on this list. I'm on the Forbes list as a venture capitalist. I want to get on the Midas list as like the most successful venture capitalist in the business. And you just go from like checkpoint to checkpoint.
Next.
Exactly.
And you realize that when you climb Mount Everest, guess what? There's another peak you're going to see. So the key is that progress is the happiness. That growth is the happiness. That keeping the momentum moving forward. And it reminds me of that quote of become a man of value, not a man of success. And a woman, of course, in that case as well. But that's how the quote goes. And it's like you said, it reminds me of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. He's like, we're so trained in society to just go to school, get good grades, work hard to get a good job, and then get that PhD or master's degree. And it's like, well, the path isn't always linear, and everyone has a different definition of success and what success means to them.
I see that, and early on in my life, I thought, I measure myself kind of thinking mathematically, not as the first derivation, like not where I am, but what my climb rate is. And then at some point I was like, I thought I could be really smart. I was like, I measure myself not by how fast I climb, but by the speed at which my climb rate increases.
Your rate of change, the trajectory.
Exactly. And then at some point, I tried to put it down to paper, and I realized, a plane that takes off and which is climb rate ever increases, it at some point it falls from the sky. I realized that is not possible. It's not sustainable. And if I want to build any sort of sustainable change or like sustainable impact in my life, then it can't be by just one-upping my yesterday self.
And sometimes those are vanity metrics. And yes, sometimes understandably so, vanity metrics can lead to real metrics, because you're like, oh, this guy's really smart. He went here. Let me reach out to him. And maybe he wouldn't have reached out to you if you didn't have that vanity metric. So I can understand the value in that. But then there comes a time where you ask yourself and you reflect as often as possible, so you can question and say, is this really what I want? And I'm a fan of the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah, I love
the intersection of your greatest competency and your greatest passion. And to me, that is your life's purpose. A lot of people just do what they happen to might be good at or passionate about. But when you reach that intersection, you realize that, oh, wait, it's not about being better than my peers or being the smartest person in the room or having the most titles or having the most degrees or having the most achievements. It's what is uniquely successful to me? What is uniquely my purpose and my identity? I was just talking with a Dartmouth client of mine, and he's going through this challenge right now of comparing himself because he's in a room with unbelievable individuals, some of the smartest people in the world working on the hardest problems in the world, which many groups are doing. And he's realized that he started to compare himself to the other individuals in the room. And so I have to remind him that there's a uniqueness about him that no one else in the world could ever be, that no one else in the world could ever have. And that is what value you bring, is your uniqueness. Yeah. The books you read, the people you've met, the places you've been, the experiences you've had. Only you will ever have that in your entire life. No one will ever be the second best version of you.
Very true. Very true.
And
but it takes a maturity to get there, right?
And putting your ego to the side.
Yeah.
Having an ego death so you can realize, oh, there's more growth to happen here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, putting that, I always thought my process of like positioning myself uniquely was a sign of my imposter syndrome, to say like, oh, and here he comes, and like he's in venture capital, and then he kind of leaves venture capital to be a coach, and I thought, well, is that really progress, like on the venture capital scale? But then again, does it matter?
Yeah, what barometer are you using? What
exactly.
metric are you using to measure yourself? Is it happiness? Is it finances? Yeah. Is it the quality of relationships I have? Is it my physical health, my mental health, my social health? What metric are you using?
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned happiness, because then I started working with a venture fund investing in the emerging science of health and happiness. And so this is one of my other roles where I help these guys who came from the US, started up in Europe about a year ago, to basically land here. I help them run the German speaking market. And when you start investing in health and happiness, there comes a highly interesting philosophical question or discussion about like, what is happiness? What makes the individual happy, and how can you scale happiness?
Yes, and then you even look at the biochemical level.
Oh, very much so.
The hormone influx of dopamine and serotonin and the decreasing levels of cortisol, for example.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, this fund is at the intersection of bio and tech, very much. And I'm one of the few non-scientists on the team.
Very cool work that you're doing, and it's so important, especially now. Mental health, what used to be this taboo subject, like, oh my gosh, you need a therapist or you need a coach, and it was almost frowned upon. And now we're starting to highlight and reward and shout from the rooftops how important it is, and almost look at it as a badge of achievement, because you are investing in yourself, again, not just on a physical level by going to the gym or getting a personal trainer, but on a mental level.
Very much so. 4 or 5 years ago, there was his founder in London. His name is, I think, James. The company's called Sanctus, and I'm not invested in this company, but he back then already, he was like, mental health is highly important for entrepreneurs. And back then I was like, that's a far out thesis. And today I'm like, of course,
Yes.
Why would not everyone see this? But he's been continuously pushing that message, and it needs to be continuously pushed. And I'm very happy, to support that.
It's entered the dialogue now. We can talk about it and embrace it with open arms. And the work you're doing, it reminds me of Sean Akers' work. He's the scientist who studies happiness, I think, more often than any other scientist in the world. He has the most often enrolled in class in Harvard's history, and it's on happiness. And Tim Ferriss was interviewing him. This is my first exposure to Sean Akers. And Tim's like, let's get down to the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. What's the 20% of stuff I could do to generate 80%, as Tim does, to generate 80% of the impact? It's like, what's the bare minimum I can do to statistically significantly increase my happiness? And he said there's 5 things. Sean Akers did. And based on his research, he found that if you do these 5 things, It's the bare minimum you could do with the greatest return on investment from a statistical significance standpoint on your happiness. One was exercise cardiovascularly for a minimum of 15 minutes every day. Number two was meditate, and it could be as little as 2 minutes, even in a cubicle of just closing your eyes and focusing on your breath, 2 minutes. Number three was sharing gratitude or appreciation. So thanks for someone, a different person every single day. So it could be as simple as just a one-liner text.
Right.
Hey, appreciation or gratitude. You looked great yesterday. You did great yesterday. Or thanks for that book you recommended. Whatever it may be, it has to be a different person every day. Number four was writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day. But here's the key. It has to have happened in the past 24 hours. Because what happens is they notice is when everyone journals their gratitude, they write down the same things every time.
Yeah.
God, my health, my happiness, my family, my friends. And over time, you become desensitized to it, especially if you write it down every day. So he says you have to write it down, but it has to be 3 things that have happened in the past 24 hours. So that way it's different every single day.
Right.
And then lastly, number 5 was writing down 3 details of a positive event that happened in the past 24 hours. And the more specific you are, the better. So for example, let's say someone gave you a compliment on your shirt and you're like, oh, I really loved how that person just had the adamancy of coming up to me and telling me this, even though they didn't know me. Or I really like the shoes that person was wearing as they mentioned the comment. So the more specific you are, the better. So 3 details about a positive event that happened in the past 24 hours. So I love taking a scientific approach to something as such of an art of happiness is and turning it into more of a science.
Absolutely. And I mean, and that, it applies some rigor, but it also means that you can potentially deploy that to a lot of people if you find out how to deliver happiness at scale. And but one element that I found especially interesting is around focusing attention by putting down 3 things that I'm grateful for in the last 24 hours and 3 positive kind of moments in all their specificity. I am focusing my attention to the positive things in my life, right? And I'm spending a lot of time recently thinking about that because I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I also catch myself kind of listening to podcasts so that I can so basically that they take my attention and they basically bring it somewhere. Because at the end of the day, I just want to be taken for a ride.
Yes.
And it's actually not so important, what kind of podcast it is. I listen about songwriting as a musician, about songwriting. I listen to the news podcasts, and I listen to leadership and venture podcasts, and the art of focusing your attention on the few things that matter, that actually drive positive change, is of such an importance that if there is only one thing that my client could take away from working with me, that would be it. And we wouldn't even, we wouldn't have even started working on their business. And yes. Most times we're talking about business topics and organizational topics and stuff like that. But it's where it all starts.
Where focus goes, energy flows.
Exactly.
And what you tend to focus on becomes your reality. Your perspective becomes your reality.
Exactly.
2 people could go to the same event and have 2 completely different perspectives on how it went because of what they focused on at the event, for example.
Yeah. My girlfriend repeats the mantra, thoughts, words, action. And that's how her thoughts manifest into reality.
Yes, it's so true. And it used to sound like airy fairy woo-woo type stuff. And now we're realizing there's science behind it and it actually works.
Right.
And you generate a more impactful, happy life as a result. So what do you tell clients that have this ego issue? And how do you manage that? How do you help them get over that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that have their own company. They might even be on the Forbes list, and
Right.
they don't want to look inferior. Like, oh, I need a coach. What is that going to look like to the team if I need to reach out to someone for help?
That's interesting, because the way I phrase my work is not coaching as in you are not okay, my friend. Phil, I am coming in to save you. This is an intervention. Go lie down on my couch. It's hey, it's great to be partnering up. We are working together. I am on your team as much as, for example, an investor would be on your company's team. I mean, that's kind of the difference. The investor looks at the company, where a coach is looking at the human.
It's important to have
the
someone
entrepreneur.
that's invested directly in your success, not just from
Exactly.
a company standpoint, but you as an individual.
Exactly, but I think the key is, I'm not threatening you. I'm not lecturing you. I am your partner for success, and that is my only metric. We will do anything that will move you ahead on your terms. And
Yep.
I think that here's where there's a plethora of like coaching businesses that try to do coaching at scale, and I think there's a very good point to do this. I mean, I'm preaching this to the choir. Doing this over text messaging is a great way, to nudge people into like the right direction. And I see this as an investor, right? The added challenge with entrepreneurs or people in executive and leadership positions is they oftentimes they want someone to actually sit down with, even if it's over video call, but like they want to be accountable to someone and feel like they're partnering up with that person. And I think then it becomes really important to kind of establish rapport, to relate to them, and make sure that we're on eye level. And it's not this like parent-child relationship. It's like, I'm the coach, and now I'm going to tell you how it works. Because then everyone will do as I'm telling them. I have no experience to tell you how to live your unique life, because you would be, try practicing 25 years of playing guitar, then you can live my life. But that's not, I'm doing that already.
And I like what you said. It's not necessarily help. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with you. You're already crushing it. That's what I tell my clients. You're already crushing it. You're already achieving things. You wouldn't be here where you are today if you weren't. We're just going to take it to the next level and help you get to where you want to be. And it helps to have someone that you can't always tell your board members everything you want to talk about. Your mom, your girlfriend, you don't want your significant other to become your therapist, for example.
Yeah.
Everybody has, one, an inherent bias, and two, sometimes it's a conflict of interest. But who can you be open to that has absolutely no bias and is solely invested in the direct success of you as an individual?
Absolutely. And
Coach.
I've seen this. I mean, I sat on enough boards to see the kind of behavior, even and I mean, today, every investment fund tells you, we're founder first and we're founder friendly. And yes, when I then look at, term sheets, there are standard terms that are tagged kind of founder friendly, but you really figure out what founder friendly means kind of 2.5 years later, when that specific portfolio company hasn't made the breakout spot. Maybe later, but right now it's at like number 4, 5, 6, somewhere hovering in the middle. It's not really interesting, but it's also not dead. And then the question is, who spends time with that founder? And those are the people who make a real difference. But it's not part of the venture business model for sure.
Yeah, because their ultimate goal is to make sure the company succeeds, irrespective of whether the individual succeeds or not.
Well, that's number one, and number two is if you're it's somewhere in the middle of the portfolio, your chances to be that number one in the portfolio are just slim to none. And so they will invest all of their resources in the front runner that will make their next fund.
So important to have a coach, someone that's just directly invested in you. I have two coaches, and I think there's an amazing opportunity for you to get a coach, even if it's not Julius and I. There's tons of coaches out there that are helping people every single day in all facets of life, from physical health to mental health to finances, etc., to holistic coaching. It's becoming more and more mainstream, which is a good thing for everyone and the coaching business as a whole. And what I always recommend is it's not about the paper. So it doesn't matter if they have a certification or don't have a certification. I know certain entities require that, but at the end of the day, it comes down to results. So one of the things I always recommend is talk to one of their clients, reach out to someone that's already been coached by them and hear it from their perspective. They can help give you insight into what it's going to be like.
Right. And I think every coach has their style, because they're effectively just integrating their own experience with some form of coaching methodology. And and it's perfectly fine to say, hey, I don't think we're a fit here. I think I'm looking for something else. And here's what I'm looking for, because maybe that coach can then direct you to someone else.
Exactly.
I met my current business partner through my coach.
It's amazing. And just because you might have an interview with a coach, interview a bunch, and you might have an interview and it doesn't work out. It doesn't mean coaching is not right for you. It might just mean you need to go through the coaching experience a couple times before you land on the one that you like, what works best for you. And that's why I always offer a free discovery call to learn two things. One, do we have chemistry and rapport? And two, is their goal within my scope of practice? And if not, if neither of those two things match, I can refer them to someone else.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I do want to mention is Julius was generous enough for you in the audience to offer 3 coaching sessions for the price of 2. And where do they go for that? And what do they have to mention in order to take advantage of that opportunity with you?
Yeah. So the coaching company I'm running with my partner is called Volate, Volate.com. Go to the website, reach out through the contact form, tell us you're coming through this podcast, and we're super happy and excited to work with you wherever you're based. We can do that digitally. Obviously, if you're based in Europe, maybe that's also something that we can do in person.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the generosity, and please take advantage of this opportunity. Find a coach, work with one, test it out, see what you like, what you don't like, and you will see improvement in one way or another, or at least clarity in what you're looking for. We're going to transition now a bit to something I like to call the under 30 seconds round.
Okay.
I'm going to fire off a few questions. Just answer the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Well, number 1, what is the book you've gifted more often than any other book, and why?
Carol Dweck, Growth Mindset. I read it really early, and it just had me. Some of the examples. I was very, very young when I read it, but some of the examples are like, a successful marriage is built on this and that. I was like, I don't know what a successful marriage takes, because I haven't been married. But kind of the general outlook on how you develop as a human was just fantastic and like intriguing to me. And I keep gifting this book.
It's a great book. And if you haven't read it, it's about a Stanford researcher who debunks a bunch of information. If you're a teacher, parent, or coach in any facet, it's an absolute must read. I mean, you'll learn things like never say good job to a child. You need to use something called appropriate praise. So specificity around why you're encouraging someone, for example, or praising someone. Great book. Thanks for the recommendation. 2, what's one of the best investments and one of the worst investments you've ever made, and why?
The best investments have always been relationships. Spending time with people and spending honest, 100% focused time. Because all of the things that I have, all of the opportunities that have found their way to me have come through someone that I didn't expect would bring that to me, and so spending time, showing gratitude, taking that in entrepreneurial speak extra mile, to help someone without expecting anything in return. I think that's like forever the best investment that you can make. The worst investment I made, I mean, I invested in a bunch of companies that have gone bankrupt since, but that's kind of part of the job,
What's the most impactful thing you do in your morning routine and the most impactful thing you do in your evening routine?
So I work out and I meditate every morning. It sounds, I don't know, maybe I'm listening to too many of these kind of leadership podcasts, because that's what everyone apparently says. But after kind of practicing that for years now, I need it. Like I can go 1 day without a workout, but like after 3 days without a workout, I'm just not usable anymore, and my attention goes everywhere. And the same goes for meditation. I'm not quite there yet. I'm much better at working out than I am at meditation, but I think that's kind of my routine in the morning. And the evenings, actually gratitude. This was something that my girlfriend introduced, and we every night religiously talk about what we're grateful for in those 24 hours that just happened, and it's to the point where we're almost asleep already, and still when I would ask, or she would ask, what are you grateful for today, the other one kind of lights up. And here we go.
It's a great way to end the day. End it with a positive. What type of meditation are you practicing now?
So I try to free myself from any kind of bucket, or like I use this app, or I practice this kind of I don't know, specific type of meditation. I basically just sit down, quiet down, focus my thoughts. I have to wear earphones a lot of the times, just because I get a lot of distraction from noise. Maybe that's because I'm a musician, but like I have to cover my ears, and I don't do guided meditations. I just go with where my thoughts go, and I try to kind of, as I realize I'm kind of drilling into a thought pattern, I try to let go of it and just let it flow for about 10 to 15 minutes.
It sounds like you would get a lot of value out of the meditation I practice is Transcendental Meditation, TM. It's the most scientifically studied meditation in the world. It was a required course for Ivy Leagues in the 70s, tm.org. Jerry Seinfeld, Ray Dalio from Bridgewater Investments, Tony Robbins, Oprah, they all use it. It's amazing. It's all unguided, 20 minutes twice a day. And once you're trained in it, you're trained for life, but it will teach you that you won't even need headphones. The noise pollution actually becomes part of your internal transcendence, as they call it. I've been using it since 2013. It's a game changer. I've used all the apps too, just to see from my client's perspective what it will be like, because I always want to be able to share insights for them. But it's brilliant, and I think you would really appreciate it.
Thank you
based
very
on
much.
what you just
I'll check
told
that
me.
out. TM.com.
Yeah, tm.org.
.org.
Yeah,
Thank you.
.org. It's a great one. And pretend you won the Peter Thiel Fellowship and you were going to get money to start a business instead of go to college. What's the very first thing you do to start a new business?
So this is going to be a bit more boring answer than talking about coaching, because that's what I'm already doing. I've done a lot of CF, like finance work, but also from the operating perspective. The CFO software stack is absolutely broken, and starting a company that would help finance professionals, especially for small companies, is direly needed. And I think a lot of bankruptcies and business failures are attributed to just people not getting their numbers straight. And it's because there is not sufficient infrastructure for that. And that's what I would tackle.
There you go. If you're thinking about starting a business, Julius just gave you a head start.
Yeah, go for it. And please do approach me for angel investment if that would ever be the question.
Last question. What's something you never knew you needed?
My ebook reader with backlight. My girlfriend gave me that for Christmas, and at first I thought, why do I need that? Can't I read books, like actual paper books? And since then, I'm reading like 2 to 3 books a month now, just because I can read when she's already asleep. I can read anywhere. I have all my books. Sorry, this sounds like an advertising now, but like it's amazing. I can access all of that just at the press of a button, and it has made the habit of reading and consuming information that way so much more convenient, because I could just keep building that muscle.
And what's great about those, you could take notes, and I'm like you previously, I like the physical hard copy book, but I understand the convenience of having an ability to travel, and you could take notes right on the e-reader. And actually with the meditation, Transcendental Meditation, you can actually assimilate that knowledge better, because the they show that with normal regular meditation, you reach about 30% alpha waves in the brain. With Transcendental Meditation, you reach 90% alpha waves in the brain. And so actually enhances the gray matter, which ultimately allows you to assimilate more knowledge, because you're essentially doing less to do more. And in some cases, we think we need to always be doing more. Sometimes it's just a matter of subtraction, not addition.
That's fascinating.
Well, Julius, thank you so much for being here today. This has been incredible. I'm so happy we finally got a coach on here. Before you go, what's next for you? What's the next big goal, milestone, or bucket list item you want to achieve?
Well, so we're hard at work to build kind of the #1 destination for founder coaching in Europe. I think that's enough work for a while. The other thing is, I release a song every now and then. I released one last month. I'm going to be releasing one hopefully in the next 2 months. And so if I want to have like a more short-term goal, that's that. Go back to the studio.
Where do listeners go to connect with you directly?
On Spotify. My artist name is Julba, Julba.
And what if they want to connect with you about coaching, or outside of coaching, just you as a person, not just your music?
Please, of course, do reach out on LinkedIn or through volate.com. I think I'm fairly easy to catch.
What does the word mean, by the way?
Volate is fly in Latin and in Italian, and that's the purpose of our company.
Boom. There you go. Well, Julius, that's a great way to transition to conclude. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. This is Julius with Volate, who does coaching for founders, especially in Europe. Please reach out to him so you can learn to fly. We learned so much today. We learned how to fly. We learned how to overcome that ego or that hesitation to dive into coaching. We learned some hacks for your everyday routine. Julius, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Have an amazing day.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Who do you think would benefit from hearing it? You can make an impact on their life by sharing it now. Before you go, I encourage you to tell us your favorite part of the episode in the review section. Now it's time to level up. Level up.